Jason Statham's latest action movie, The Beekeeper, is out this weekend, and believe it or not, it's actually pretty good. Let's talk about it. Hey there, welcome back to Behind the Kernel, where I love to dive just a little bit deeper into our favorite TV shows and movies. If you can relate with that, drop down in the comments and let me know if you've already seen The Beekeeper, or if you plan on going to see it. I would highly suggest, if you do plan on going to see it this weekend, save this video and then come back later, because there are some serious spoilers in this video. Real quick before we dive into the review, if you are new here, consider hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss a single upload, and if not, I'm just glad that you're here with us. Let's dive into The Beekeeper. So the basic plot of The Beekeeper is about Mr.clay, played by Jason Statham, who he basically is in this, like, they call it the Beekeeper program, and while he actually does keep bees, he's kind of like government. Like, he is very high up. They make that very clear from the get-go. And he's basically living on this, like, old lady's, like, ranch. He's just kind of minding his own business when she gets scammed out of all of her life savings, every count zero, and she was, you know, this helper in charity and just all these great things, and she actually decides to kill herself. And when they all find out why she did, he then takes matters into his own hands. This leads him to going to the first call center and then just kind of following the money trail. And in the movie, they make a lot of beehive jokes because it's very much like a hive, like you're going up to the queen. Essentially, that's his goal in this movie, is to eradicate the disease, is what he calls it, in the hive. The first thing I want to talk about in this movie is probably my favorite part about it, the villains. The main villain in this is actually Josh Hutcherson. He's this very bratty kid who is essentially just, you know, makes his money through illegal means. I mentioned this call center that scammed this lady of all her life savings. Well, this is what this call center regularly does. And they pretty much, in this call center, they have like 20 different locations. And then, of course, like, they have the top dog. Well, they have like a showroom floor. And I don't know if it's just like how the way it was done and the way it was like the way it looked, but it just felt very fresh to me. And like, the villains were like, and that's another one, $2 million scammed. And it was just like, really, like, it felt so accurate to like what would actually happen in today's society. Like, they would just be like, oh yeah, 2 million, I got it. And I just thought it was a great, like, fresh take on like modern criminals and how they act, because I genuinely feel like this is how they would act. Touching a little bit more on Josh Hutcherson, he basically, like, doesn't understand, like, the Beekeeper are like, throughout this whole movie, they're like, oh, like, why can't we just get, like, all the security together? He's like, there's no, like, taking down the Beekeeper with, like, these guys, like, make Navy SEALs look like kindergarten kids. And I just think it's really funny that, like, Josh Hutcherson doesn't understand. Like, he's just like, well, just hire more people. And that's essentially, like, he's just running away the whole time of the movie. But it makes sense because he's a very bratty kid, if that makes any sense. I do want to talk about the action for a minute, because it's actually quite good. Specifically, the one that I, like, really remember is at the very end of this movie, when they're at the, like, they're, like, at the presidential suite, like, or something, some kind of, like, the books kind of thing. And they hire this guy from what I guess is, like, just some special ops thing. And he has, like, all these things on his belt, and, like, he has scars, and he talks about how he once took down a beekeeper. And he, like, gives Jason Statham a run for his money. He ends up stabbing him. But what ends up happening in the end is, like, a very just, like, it's for, like, a minute or 2 minutes long of just them, like, in this one hallway going at each other. There's no music that plays, and it just felt very raw and very, like, I don't know, like, my attention was, like, so honed in on that fight, and I absolutely loved what they did there. Another part that I didn't mention is that the mom who killed herself has a daughter, and she's kind of like with the FBI, and they kind of follow Jason Statham. They're kind of like they're just kind of like there, like they don't really do much. They're just kind of like the voice of reason with him. They're like, hey, like Jason, like please don't do this. A really good twist that I did not see coming is they kind of like, as they keep getting higher and higher into the power ranks of like who's really behind this, they discover that Josh Hutcherson is actually the president's son, and that she didn't know how he paid for the presidential campaign. She just knew that he had businesses, but she didn't know that he was making it illegally, like by scamming people out of their money. And she, like, it ends up that like, oh, she's the president, and she actually like basically like talks about like she's like not okay with what he did. Like when she finds out, she's like, no, like we have to tell the truth. And it just kind of becomes like a really like kind of internal conflict between the villains, if that makes sense. The last thing I do want to mention is that I love the way that the call centers were portrayed in this. Like they have these like big screens, and like they have like multiple things of like older people like who don't really understand anything about technology, and they're like, and that's $60,000 scammed, and he's like, you win like this promotion for the month. It's like a very like competitive, almost like a game, like what's the person that we can scam the most. And honestly, it just adds like a humor element to it, because it's such a serious topic of like scamming people out of their life savings, and they're treating it like some game. They're like, and you win today's prize for scamming the most people. And I was like, okay, that's interesting for sure. A lot of times in these like action Jason Statham movies that we get, the villains always feel very generic to me. They're just like the opposite of Jason Statham. They're this, you know, high up guy and claim that they can do all this stuff. And I like that they didn't do that with this movie. It felt like Josh Hutcherson was like, yeah, like I know I'm not gonna, you know, last 1 second with this guy, but we're gonna send as many guys at him we can. And like I can't stop what I'm doing. And it just felt like a newer kind of approach on these kinds of movies, and I'm here for it. I'm absolutely here for it. So yeah guys, that's pretty much it for this movie. Again, I had a good time. I highly suggest if you weren't planning on going to see this, maybe reconsider. I didn't think that it was going to be nearly as good as it was, and it surprised me. So I might even end up going to see this a second time, because again, it was enjoyable. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video. Until then guys, peace.